Welcome to the 5150 style guitar methods. I'm Mutz Marsh, the Eddie Van Halen geek. In this channel, I explain how I understand and apply the Eddie Van Halen technique. My guitar brain is 95% Eddie Van Halen. That's why I call my guitar style the 5150 style, after Eddie. I have an overwhelming number of research notes on Eddie Van Halen on the shelves in my room. It's safe to say that these notes represent my deep love for Eddie Van Halen. My role here is to turn all of that into videos and share them with the world. My attempt is to stock the playing techniques I've learned from Eddie so that I can draw from them and use them as my own phrases at any time. There are no tutorials here to help you play Van Halen's songs. This is a method for building improvisation that only I can do worldwide. I'm not sure if this will be of any help to everyone, but I would be happy if you could watch it, just to pass the time. Everyone, stay tuned. This time we'll focus on Pentatonic Minimum Unit 2 and take a look at this style of playing by Eddie Van Halen. First, take a listen to this. This is a part of Eddie's incredible guitar solo from a 1977 stage recording. Focus on the three-note pentatonic phrase created using the high E and B strings. Start playing slowly and gradually increase the speed as you move up by half steps. Finally, reach the A position at the 17th fret, hitting maximum speed. Eddie's power and sense of speed are truly amazing. It's almost impossible to replicate this exactly as it is, so for now, let's skip the half-step movements and practice playing just on the 17th fret. The basic picking technique for these three notes is as follows. If I were to name this in the 1-3-1 system style, 1-2 move would be the most appropriate. The sounds of the B string and the high E string can overlap. There's no time to separate them. In fact, overlapping them adds more power. Focus on quickly synchronizing your right and left hands and aim for the wildest sound possible. In my case, when the speed reaches its maximum, I end up skipping the second picking. At first I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I think it was because the picking couldn't keep up with the speed, or I simply forgot to pick. Eddie's speed is even faster, so if you're trying to catch up, there's barely any time to pick at all. Actually, I think this way of playing might work too. What do you all think? Also, if you delay the pressing of the note with your ring finger just slightly, you can turn it into a four-note phrase. Since the timing between your right and left hands is nearly the same, it's an easy way to add variation. By randomly combining these two approaches, you can create unpredictable, complex phrases, so give it a try. Note that when you switch to the four-note version, you'll definitely need the second downpick. The pentatonic minimum unit we've discussed in number 1 to number 3 is also something Eddie incorporates. In addition to these three notes, he weaves in phrases that closely resemble those in number 1, just like this. Eddie doesn't double the first note like in number 1, instead he repeats the phrase straight through. sounds really great. Now let's combine this with the earlier 3 notes phrase. In this kind of playing, you shouldn't get too caught up in the tempo, beat, or rhythm. You need to ignore them to some extent. But I know that probably doesn't make much sense, right? This is the concept of free tempo. But for example, Eddie's tremolo picking doesn't focus on how many times he picks per beat or any of those details, right? Whether it's slow blues or an up-tempo boogie, the speed of his tremolo picking stays roughly the same. That sense is the key. You play this phrase the same way, ignoring the tempo, beat and rhythm to some extent, but still being aware of the overall flow of the song from a broader perspective. If you focus solely on matching the rhythm between your right and left hands, you might find it works out better. I think this is a topic that hasn't been touched on much by anyone so far, but it's a very important part of my interpretation of Eddie, and it forms the core of it. To play with a free tempo sense while still maintaining a solid tempo and beat. By doing so, you can completely change the way you approach improvisation, 180 degrees. I guess you could say it's about being free, without being bound by anything. Anyway, I believe this is such a revolutionary approach, so I highly recommend it. Now, I'll actually try it with a backing track, so check it out. I have the Fool's backing track, so I'll loop a part of it and use it. The key is G. This is the way to play in free tempo. Well, for me, it's just the usual feeling. I play with this feeling in many situations. I think it's important to explain a bit about how I came to adopt the free tempo style of playing. Eddie often plays phrases where he quickly repeats 3-note, 5-note or 7-note patterns like the one we just covered. I've always loved and admired this kind of pentatonic phrasing. I've always wanted to replicate it myself. To understand the mechanism, I first transcribed it accurately and traced it. I can trace it slowly, but I always found myself wondering, what kind of timing should I be thinking about? Especially in the early days, the more I studied, the more confused I became. The note sequences are similar, but the timing and the relationship to the beats are different every time. At first I thought, Eddie is a genius for fitting 7 notes into 30-second notes and repeating them. I'd say, no matter which note starts, he can keep the rhythm. That's what's amazing about Eddie. I wanted to be like that, so I practiced endlessly, trying to fit 7 notes into an 8th note rhythm, but all it did was confuse my mind and almost drive me crazy. And there was one more thing that happened by chance. It was when I was recording myself improvising over a slow blues backing track. I made a mistake with the settings, and only the lead guitar sound and my video were recorded on the computer. The backing track wasn't recorded. By the time I tried to review the footage as it was too late. I couldn't recreate it as it originally was. Still, I wanted to somehow turn that video into something, so in a moment of desperation, I decided to layer a blues backing track over the lead guitar sound and video. To my surprise, just by aligning the timing to some extent, it sounded like I was actually improvising. There were parts where I started playing with a timing I hadn't used before, and it turned out to be a truly interesting experiment and experience. Next, I overlaid a hard rock backing track in the same key onto the same lead guitar sound and video. To my surprise, it also looked completely natural, as if I was improvising over a hard rock track. I got so intrigued that I kept recording just the lead parts in various styles and keys, then mashed them up with backing tracks of different styles for fun. This eventually led me to discover what it all meant and what it brought to me. It was the moment I realized that I could play the same phrases even when the style, rhythm and tempo were different. Until then, I hadn't been able to play the same phrases equally well when the style, rhythm or tempo changed. And yet, in the mashed up videos, I found myself pulling it off naturally. This was a way of playing I had never even considered before. I should be able to recreate the same thing as the version of me in the video. It's something that's hard to do if you're not used to it, but it becomes possible by letting go of or adopting a certain feeling. I gradually began to understand that. This was the early stage of my free tempo approach. At the same time, I started to develop a new perspective. Could Eddie also be incorporating this way of playing? By shifting my viewpoint, it felt like many of the questions I had up until that point started to be resolved. I often hear that Eddie's timing is hard to copy, but I think the reason for this is that there are moments when he is thinking only about playing fast, without regard to tempo or beat. Eruption and concert guitar solos don't have a beat to begin with, do they? I think there are times when Eddie is doing the same thing as in Eruption. I've already come to that conclusion, but the truth is, we'd have to ask Eddie himself to really know for sure. However, one thing's certain, when I play fast in free tempo, I end up creating phrases that closely resemble Eddie's. What I originally thought about fitting 7 notes into 30-second notes and repeating them was completely off the mark. In my opinion, to achieve the free tempo approach, you need plenty of fast phrases like those in Eruption. That's why I often listen to the kind of material I mentioned in this topic. Eddie has tons of simple, cool and fast phrases. For me, Eruption is like a treasure trove. The reason I take the time to transcribe every little thing that no one seems to notice is to expand the scope of the free tempo approach. I've spent far more time practicing playing in the style of Eruption than working with a metronome. I started with a bit of fast playing at the endings of songs like You Really Got Me or I'm the One, but I highly recommend it. Yes, that's all for this issue. How did it go? If you like it, please give us a high rating and subscribe to my channel. High ratings and channel subscriptions are my best motivation. Best regards. I will continue to upload useful information for rock guitarists, so don't miss it. Again, what I show in the 5150 style video is just an example of how I understand and utilize the Eddie Van Halen technique. There are 10 different interpretations of the technique for every 10 people, so it's up to you how you use what you learn. It may sound contradictory to say this when I am in the position of posting videos on YouTube, but to be clear, the most important part of music and guitar cannot be learned from YouTube videos. It is important to be willing to use your ears to learn and to be generous with your time. It is very important to feel the nuance and feeling with your ears. Even if it is wrong, it is very important to spend time thinking, how is it played? and try this and that, and it is very important to spend that time. There are no shortcuts. That is why I want you to spend as much time as you can with the notes. That's what I think. The watchword is keep on rocking, right? See you soon. Bye-bye.